Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Hey folks, I want to take a minute to give you a heads up about Tethered's latest gear. If you're serious about staying mobile in the woods, you've got to check this stuff out. Now, I've been using their Ultra Lock saddle, and now the SD saddle is available. And let me tell you, this thing is dialed. It's ultra light, super adjustable, and most importantly, it's comfortable. You're not going to be shifting around up in the tree wondering if your legs are going to fall asleep. Pair that with the Predator V platform, which is stable, lightweight, and has an angled front edge for comfort. This thing will give you plenty of room for those critical moments when you need to make a move on a deer. And if you're like me and you spend long hours in the tree, you'll appreciate the new Predator CFX platform. Carbon fiber construction that keeps it light, but tough enough to handle whatever you throw at it. This is the kind of gear that makes a difference when you're out there all day. And listen, if you're always juggling your gear like I am, Tethered's got you covered with the Universal Platform Pack. More rigid to make getting your platform in and out easier, and 2 sizes to fit the smaller and larger platforms. Whether you're hunting public land or heading to your favorite spot on the back 40, this setup makes carrying your platform so much easier. So if you're serious about getting in the game this season and hunting smarter, check out Tethered at tethered.com. Their gear will keep you lighter, quieter, and up in the tree longer, which, as we all know, is where the magic happens. Welcome to the Truth from Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 427. Today, I'm joined by my buddy, Cameron Derr, to talk about adapting to pressure and changing strategies to kill mature bucks. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine, and hopefully you've been able to stay out of some of this nasty weather. Hopefully you had good travel weather while you were at the Great American Outdoor Show. If you made it over there to check out some of our buddies, always this time of year, it's nasty traveling back and forth from that thing. It always seems like the weekend that it starts and the weekend that it ends is always the worst, the worst possible weather, making travel kind of an issue. But for me, whenever that trade show kind of happens, unfortunately I wasn't able to get there this year. It kind of marks like the official end of the previous season. I know the season has been out, at least for me in PA, it ended, at the end of January, where the particular area that I live. That really kind of was always a demarcation of like, all right, turning the page on to the next season, and, start looking forward to really hitting the timber to scout, obviously doing some shed hunting, tinkering with gear, kind of getting everything ready for the upcoming season. Cause you'll have a lot of stuff that's going on during the spring, whether you're turkey hunting or whatever the case is, and you have family vacations and stuff like that. And then before you know it, summer's here, trail cameras have to be out. And then we're right back into it like it just, like we just left it, essentially, whenever that late September kind of time frame rolls around. So I'm doing exactly that, kind of making my plan, thinking about, what areas I want to scout this year. Certainly going to do a little bit of shed hunting. That always kind of turns into a scout for me, less so shed hunting. And then also kind of starting to tinker with, I started actually tinkering with gear a handful of weeks ago, nothing major, just kind of, playing around a little bit, getting trail cameras kind of organized and stuff like that, ready to go back out into the woods if I did pull any of them. And then for me, the big thing is I actually got a text message of my Bushman bow. So the traditional longbow that Steve Jewett is making for me. I got a text message of the progress of that, that's happening with that. And so that's getting closer and closer to landing in my hands. So I've been spending some time looking at arrows, trying to figure out what the arrow setup might be. I'll probably use a very similar arrow setup that I've been using already. But I think I'm going to tinker with 1 or 2 other arrows from 2 different companies, probably, just to kind of see, if I like them any better. I think what I've been using has been working. If it's not broke, don't fix it, and I'm comfortable with it. I can use them. I can build them, most importantly. I just don't like to get into things that have too many components. The more things that I have to deal with, and manage, the more likely, the higher the likelihood that I'll mess something up or something won't just be quite right. But with that, I'm going to play around with a couple different options and see what arrow and what approach I like best. But with that, we're going to just go ahead and jump into today's show. Today I have an awesome show for you guys. Got my good buddy Cameron Derr on. He's been on in the past. It's been a little while since he's been on, but when I shot that deer out in the plains, actually, that was probably the last podcast he was on. He actually hosted a Truth from the Stand podcast for me. It was after I shot that deer out in the Midwest. He kind of was the host on the show and interviewed me, and we talked about that hunt. And that was the last time I had him on. But he's had a couple great seasons the past couple years. He's had a bunch of life changes that have happened. We talked a little bit about that. And then he had a great hunt this year, just full of kind of, like a lot of us do, a lot of ups and downs where things not going your way, learning new information, deer disappearing, that you had your eye on, people knowing of a deer you're hunting, a lot of pressure kind of moving into an area. But he just kind of stuck with it and learned a lot this season in chasing this one particular deer that he's chased over the course of, I think it was 2 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. And finally put the puzzle pieces together. And then the interesting thing is, a lot of times when you look back on this, and I talked to this, I think, with my buddy Ty when I had him on, about how much you learn after the fact, after you kill a deer that you're chasing. And when you think back and then when it finally kind of happens, you start to really understand how it happened or why it happened, or you can kind of better deconstruct the scenario, and you really kind of learn a lot about that deer. And in that, you learn a lot about what other deer are doing in the general area. And so Cameron kind of had that experience this year, ended with a happy ending. I'll let him tell the story. But with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump into today's show. As always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Today, I got my buddy on, Mr. Cam, the cameraman. What's going on, dude?
Oh, just living, Good to see you, Clint. Good to talk to you. It's been a while.
It has been a while, man. I've missed your face, dude. I haven't seen you. Like usually I make my trip west, every year, and then I end up stopping in and seeing, you and the boys, and this year I didn't make my trip west, so I didn't get a chance to run into you. But how things been, dude? What have you been up to?
A lot's changed since the last time we spoke.
I know, right?
A lot of things, but things are good. Things are, I jokingly say, like, I'm in my post-Exodus life.
Right.
So there was like a bad period for a little while, but we're on the upswing. But
nice.
Yeah, I think you and I hunted together in 23 in Kansas.
Yeah.
So since then, I bought a house, bought a farm, got engaged, lost the job, got a new job. So,
dude,
I've lived like a whole life in the last.
I was gonna say, like, you're ready to retire, dude. It's like like kids are off to college, all good to go. All right. Yeah. How's that newly engaged life? Oh, it's not newly. I know it's been a little bit, but how's the engaged life treat you, man?
It's great. We planned, or we thought we would have been married by now, but the farm that we bought's like a really old farmhouse. It has 13 acres and an old barn. And we've been so focused on fixing this place up that, like, almost forgot that we weren't married. And we're like, we never finalized this thing.
Hold on. You might have forgot. I promise you, she did not forget it.
maybe. But yeah, we're gonna probably do that thing here pretty soon, probably this year. But it's gonna be like a small do it by ourselves type deal.
All right. That's kind of always the best. I mean, my wife and ours wasn't big, like 100 people or something like that. And like I say, it's not big where it's like, I have a very large kind of, my dad has 9 brothers and sisters, right? Wow. So if you factor in like all my cousins, I've got like 50 some cousins,
There's the mudding.
Yeah. And then family's divorced too. So I have like dad and then mom's side as well, so it could have got out of hand really quick. So we had to cap it at just like, like immediate family and then like aunts and uncles, and that's it. Right.
Yeah.
And then some friends, like friends of family and stuff like that, because otherwise it was just going to get unruly. And it was just like the right size to where it's like everybody that was there, I knew them. Cause that's like, you get into some of that stuff too, where it's like you start sending out invitations and you're like, do I know you? Or are you just here for the free booze? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it gets a little dicey. And then, the more people you have that you don't know, the higher likelihood there is like maybe a fisticuff that's going to break out. Because I'm always surprised like how often fights break out at like weddings.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like, we're here to love each other.
Right, yeah. It's like nothing like let's get drunk and start a fight, you know what I mean? In the middle of somebody's wedding. Oh, man. I guess it just goes to show, man. You mix a little booze with a little fun, and who knows what happens,
That's right.
Yeah. How's the farm been, man? You doing any I know you've been working on the house and stuff like that, but the property and stuff like that, but have you done any like habitat management and stuff like that? You get your hands in the dirt a little bit?
Loosely. So yeah. I bought a tractor and it was like the coolest thing, man. It's like
Yeah.
I couldn't get off that thing last summer. So I was
Yeah.
doing everything. But we have like there's like 2 tree rows is it for timber. And then we have like a fallow field, a tree row, and then there was a pasture, it was a horse farm before. And it's like 5 or 6 acres. So 2 years ago, the first summer I had it, I planted it all in beans. That didn't do very well. The deer kind of ate
Just
it up.
mowed it all down. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this year, after talking to, oh man, his name is eluding me, but at Harrisburg, we podcasted with him, and he's the corn and beans simultaneous.
Mm-hmm.
Tony LaPratt. Tony LaPratt.
Okay.
We talked to Tony LaPratt. So I tried his corn and beans. You plant them together in the same planter, just all random. So I did a little bit of that, and I did a lot of screening this year. So it was just an annual screen. I wanted to see if his theories, like he always talks about like compartmentalizing your farm, and the more a deer has to travel to see things, the more sign he'll leave and the more time he'll spend there. So I tried to do a little bit of that.
How did that work? Have you seen anything from it?
It didn't do what I thought it would do. It almost there was less sign this year than there was the year before. And that field has just been a pasture for the last forever.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if it was too much change and I was doing too much to it. I put in some rope scrapes because I was like, I'm just going to try this. I have my own property now, so why not try?
Well, if nothing else, man, you can test stuff, right? It's like whether or not you hunt it or not, you can always kind of throw it out there and just see like if something works or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think that's the one thing, that I really appreciate about like a guy like Don Higgins, right?
Uh-huh.
Like he's always testing things just to kind of see what's going to happen, right? It's like, I think this is going to happen. If I put this here, I think they'll do this, or they'll react this way, or whatever the case is. And that's why I think regardless of whether someone's talking about like hunting private land or hunting public land, like when Don talks about deer, I don't listen to him from like a private public perspective. I listen to him about deer behavior perspective. Right, because that's really what he's talking about, right? Because some people can get hung up on. I mean, there are certainly guys that are like land manager guys that is way more like the stuff that they talk about, or their knowledge is way more focused on or relevant to like the private land hunter, right? That can manipulate and build mousetraps and stuff like that. And then there are guys like Don, in my opinion, who, yes, he's manipulating stuff, but what he's really doing is like understanding deer behavior. And you can take that, what he has and what he learns and what he tells you. It's like you can basically take that to the bank. Because it's like he's tested it. Like and he doesn't say something like because he tried it once. You know what I mean? Like it's had to kind of played out consistently for him like multiple years before he says, "Yep, this is what I think." Right? And that's the one thing I really appreciate about him. And you can do that too when you're his age and you've been doing it as long as he's been doing it. Right? You've seen a lot.
Yeah, and that's the rope scrape thing is Don's thing. And I had a scrape that was like absolutely annihilated last year. There's 2 things that may have changed, but I put a rope on that limb this year, and it's also an apple tree. Last year there was apples, this year there weren't. So did they stop using that scrape because I put a rope there, or did they stop using that scrape because there's no apples on that tree and they just weren't using that? So I don't know. I'm going to let it go for, like you said, I'm going to try it for a while and see how they react to it. I talked to Jake Hofer a little bit about this too, and sometimes less is more, sometimes you go in and try to improve so much and it doesn't have, there's not an exponential gain. So at some point it comes back.
Yeah. It's not always like a 1 + 1 = 2 in that sense. You know what I mean? Like and I think it's also like the capacity of like, what can the property you're working with can handle? You know what I mean?
And what's around you. Around you. I have 13 acres, so it's not like I'm going to hold deer there. So if something else changes around me, I might do something to my farm that I think is going to be the best thing ever, but something changed next to me that could ruin it all. So
I guess from that perspective, you really have to be in tune with what is, you always have to be, in tune with, what's around you, but even more so whenever it's that size of a chunk, because like you said, like you're not going to hold deer. You're by and large going to be a pass through, you know what I mean? And so it's like I'm thinking of it in my terms. If it were me, it's like, I'm going to try to set it up to where it almost becomes like a funnel, like a pinch between two places. Like if there's food on each side, you're just making stuff up, right? It's like has to be like a place where it's like they're either going to want to funnel through to get from place to place, or a place where they're going to stop and spend a little bit of time on their way to wherever they happen to be going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's how I laid it out. I have a clear cut to the north that butts onto mine, and I have destination food to the south, and I'm right in the middle. So I was just trying to use that compartmentalization theory to get them to spend more time there instead of just walking right through.
Right.
So we'll see how it plays out.
Almost make it like a little staging area before they head to wherever they're, to the food or it's coming back to bed.
Right.
Yeah. I remember who was it I talked to? It was very early in the podcast. I forget Jake Elinger. Have you ever talked to him?
No, but I know who he is.
Yeah. Super nice guy. And like, to me, he's one of the, people, I don't think his name rings as loudly or as noticeably as like a Don or, some of the other guys people know of, like first name that they can rip off right away. I don't think he has a YouTube channel or anything like that. But he was always really good, at least like, working with smaller kind of parcels, and he's in Michigan. And that was a lot about whenever I've talked to him in the past, that his focus was more so like, hey, you're trying to just get them to spend an extra 5 or 10 minutes, like in daylight on your piece, right? You can't control where they're going. You can't control where they're staying, right? But what you can do is just try to slow them down. Right.
Yep.
And that was a lot of what he talked about, because I think he did a lot of like smaller, like back 40s and stuff like that, where where a lot of his clients, I mean, I'm sure he's done bigger, but he was always a really good dude. And so he might be worth someone just like reaching out to and chatting with about it, because he's a really smart guy with that kind of stuff. And he's in Michigan, and he's consistently killing good deer in Michigan.
Yeah, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, and old deer too. Like, killing older age class bucks, even if they don't have a lot of headgear. Like he's killing, good age class bucks. But
yeah.
So man, I know we had said we hadn't had a chance to catch up. I even forgot that we were in Kansas together. I totally forgot about that. Like I don't know why it slipped my mind. That was a fun hunt though. That was a good time. Even after I left, I stayed in touch with you. Like afterwards, I was like, "What are you doing? Where are you at?" Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how that ended up like playing out, because that was your first trip to like the plains, right? Mm-hmm. And you and I are similar in the way that the ground bug has bitten us both, where it's like we really prefer to kind of and like to be on the ground, as much as we possibly can. So what was that experience like for you, being, kind of hunting places where it's like, I can hunt ground setups exclusively,
Yeah. That's going out there, man. I was like, this is going to be my dream. This is going to be where I thrive. Like right. I'm going to be on top of the world. The terrain wasn't what I thought it was. Right, yeah. And even talking to Chad, he told me that. He's like, the terrain's not going to be what you think.
That was a big thing for me too the first time out. I was surprised.
Yeah. There's more terrain than I had thought. So you can't see as much as you would hope to see. But I had a game plan. I went out there and I was going to cover as much ground as possible. And I was trying to put myself in a situation to bed a deer down and make a play, or just have a really solid ground game. But everything was going to be from covering ground or behind the glass. Just this very similar approach that you took. I did that I was out there for 2 weeks. I did that for stuck to my guns the first 8 days, almost like drive, glass. I made one play on a deer, and nothing ever worked out on that, on the same piece that you were at. And he was a great deer. What astounded me was like how I didn't see as many deer as I thought I would. You're covering so much ground, and you'd think like you're gonna pick stuff out, and I didn't see as many as I did. So when I learned that and thought like, okay, I got to make a play at this, I went for it. But what happened was, like 8 days into the trip, more people came into camp, and they had a totally different strategy than I did. They were going to go sit in a draw and sit there for a week, and then something's going to come by and they're going to kill it. And I just didn't want to have that experience, right? I was like, that's not what I came out here to do. It could bite me. And they all killed a deer. Every one of them came out, sat in a draw, killed a buck. I opted to stick to my guns until like the last 3 days. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go sit in one of these draws that these guys killed in, and I went and sat, and I I didn't fully stick to it. You know, I didn't commit 100%. If I would have committed 100%, I would have been happier with the outcome, even if it was the same outcome. And I mean, it's a weird game, hunting and traveling. I told myself in Iowa, that was in 2022. I said, I am never going to go on an out-of-state trip and hunt by myself ever again, because I couldn't get out of my own way.
Right.
And now I had other people in camp, and I just followed suit instead of sticking to my own plan. So it's stuff that I'm learning, but all in all, I learned a ton. I think if I go, I could potentially draw Kansas again this year, and if I were to go back to Kansas, I don't think I would go back to the exact same 2 units. One of those units might be the same, but I might try something else just to capitalize on the experience that I want to have.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was the biggest thing. Like, we had a very similar plans, like going out there, and, you know, it took me 3 years, like, for the plan to come to fruition. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, I was like a dog with a bone, dude. I wasn't giving it up. I was like, this is how it's going to happen. Because to your point, you know, that, you know, well, the first time out there, I really didn't know what to expect. And I just kind of fell in love with being on the ground and hunting that way and trying to get close. And, you know, I mean, I was fortunate, I guess, that first year that I did have a couple really like good close encounters, you know, so it kind of suggested, I was like, okay, I can do this. I just need to refine it. Like, I'm making mistakes. I knew I was going to. Couple of the deer, it's like you wish you wouldn't have, because they were good. You know what I mean? Like, but I was seeing deer, you know, and so I was like, the method's working. I was like, I'm just screwing it up because I'm just not good enough at this yet, you know? And that's kind of why I like hunting by myself a lot, you know, or if I'm not, I've got a guy like, you know, the only guy I hunt with is I hunt whitetails with basically you and Chad, and I hunt elk with my buddy Wilson, and that's basically it, right? But it's nice because we have very similar kind of approaches to things, you know. So like when Chad and I went out the first time, it was like we were both like, we're going to ground and pound this thing, and that's it. Like, we're not going to get into a tree. Now, he did try to get into a tree, like, to save his life when he killed that deer, you know, like he was trying, he just couldn't find one. He was like, screw this, I'm sitting on the ground. You know, good thing he did, because it worked out, you know. But so thinking back to that, like, what would you do differently, like headed to a place that, and we just say plains, it doesn't matter what state, just like open country, like how would you approach it differently on a second trip? Because for me, like when I came back, there was very clear things that I was like, okay, these are the things I need to work on, or how I would do what I would do differently.
Yeah. So I think I would, now that I realize the deer density, I would focus spending more time in one place that I found a decent amount of deer. I always thought, like, I'm going to find more. I'm going to find more. I'm going to find a bigger one. I'm going to find a bigger one. And I never really did. And in all reality, I should have stayed where you were. And I just traveled and traveled and traveled. And I was like, I'm going to find the exact situation that I want to find. And I didn't. So I think I would get out of the truck more in an area that I had intel on. Because I was just, I mean, out there, you're just driving.
Oh, you can just drive for days if you want. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just trying to find a deer in an area. Like, you're looking at terrain, you're like, okay, there could be a deer here, there could be a deer here. But you only have so much, and the weather was warm. So you only had so much movement to capitalize on. So in my mind, I was like, I got to cover as much ground as I can in the first 2 hours of the day, because the rest of the day, I'm not going to see anything. What I should have did, and what happened to me one day, I was just parked at a gate over on that piece, and I was just sitting there with my feet out the window, taking a nap, and this buck that I ended up making a play on crosses the top of the ridge at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was like, okay, but I should have just stayed on that hill the entire day, all the time, like treat it like an elk hunt. And eventually, if I have that much time, eventually I'm going to catch something and learn more about what they're doing. Because I never got a chance to learn about how they were using it, because I was just trying to find a deer one time, one day, in one spot, and try to kill them that time. It just doesn't, that just never happens.
Yeah, it's hard to do. Like, I mean, even, you know, even if you look at guys that are really good at it, like just think like Jared and those guys, right? Like they typically don't find the deer and make a move on him like all in the same day very often, right?
Yeah.
It's usually find the deer, you watch him, unless they've kind of been on him for a little while, they've just never had the right setup to make a play, right? But usually, they'll lay back and kind of learn what that deer wants to do. Are there other deer with it? Are there does with it? Are there satellite bucks that are around him? Like just all those kind of things. And you don't learn that in like 15 minutes. You got to kind of watch the deer a little bit, and it might take you 2 or 3 days sitting at the same spot watching just to see if you can see that deer 2 times, and then it's like, okay, I've seen him twice and he's done the same thing twice. So now it's like, let's make a play on him,
Yep.
Or you can tell that there's not a deer with him, or he went to the same general area. So that's where I know I need to make the play, or whatever the case is. I always kind of referred to it as being patiently aggressive.
Yeah.
Because you got to wait. And then as soon as the opportunity is there, it's like, then you got to go. Like you just got to, it's got to be, you got to go for broke,
Yep.
But you got to be, you got to be a little bit patient and calm, like leading up to it, because every visual is not an opportunity. And I think when you go to like places where you can see like that, your first instinct is to like, there he is, I got to go get him, immediately. Because I had the same feeling. Chad and I screwed so much stuff up that first trip out there. Like, good Lord, like we look back on it, even though he killed a good deer, it was like, dude, we did like almost everything wrong that you could possibly do wrong,
Yeah.
Like spot a deer from the truck, get out with the decoy, make a move on him. Like didn't know like what other deer were with him, just, being knuckleheads. So how would you... So you would change by like spending time, because that was huge, man. That was the big thing I learned, was just like, they're not as plentiful out there as you want to think that they are. I mean, they are in areas, but like the biggest thing for me was after the first year, going into the next couple of years, was like, because I struggled the first year, the same thing, where it's like I found some deer and then I didn't see any deer and then I'd move, and then where I ended up finding deer is where I ended up killing that deer last year, and it was that general area. I knew there were deer there, and my whole thing was like, don't leave deer to find deer. Just work these deer that you have, and that's what I did. Whoa, we got some
like, fireworks
going on, man. I don't know what's happening here.
Don't leave deer to find deer.
Yeah, boom. It's like, that's the key takeaway, man. I don't even pay extra for that. That was so I think that's a sage or a very astute kind of observation, man.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. And then I need to, like, if I have 2 weeks and I have a game plan, other than make an adjustment because I see something happen, I need to stick to it. Mm-hmm. I let the success that those guys were having kind of throw me off.
Start to dictate, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, well, I need to go do what they're doing now. And it just wasn't, I didn't have enough time to do what they're doing. So, like, they were going to camp out, and I had 2 days left. And I was like, well, I guess I'll go camp in one of the spots they said they saw deer. And it just didn't work out. Yeah,
it's hard whenever, you're seeing other people have success or whatever, right? And you're not, and you're like, maybe there's something I'm doing that's wrong. It's like, well, it's maybe not so much what you're doing is wrong. It's like, maybe just the timing's not right. You know what I mean? Or like there's a small piece of it that's like, that you got to tweak,
Yep.
I always like to say that, like, most of the time people's failure has very little to do with what others are doing and more to do with what you did or didn't do, than what your opponent does, right? And if you're as good as you can possibly be, chances are like your opponent, the deer, aren't going to beat you, right? But if you're not 100% confident in what you're doing and you're making decisions at the last minute, then chances are you're making mistakes, and that's why you're going to lose, not because they did something better.
You had already lost at that point.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So speaking of losing, man, we both had some losses this year. You had a win though, at least. We'll get to the win. But I know this summer, whenever I was talking to Chad, and he knew that deer that I was gonna chase in the fall. I was sharing some pictures with him, and we were just kind of talking about it. And I don't remember exactly when it was. It might have been in like September, maybe when he got back from. Maybe it was right before he left for Idaho, or right before I left for Idaho, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what the timing was. But I sent him some pictures, and he was, and he was like, holy smokes. And he's like, have you talked to Cam? And I was like, no, I hadn't talked to him. He's like, dude, he's on a giant. And I'm like, no way. And so I knew that and he kind of expressed like the size of it and stuff like that. He didn't share any pictures or anything with me. But and so I was stoked for you. And then I didn't hear anything for like a while or whatever. And so like, tell me a little bit about this mega. We can maybe lick our wounds together on the mega.
Yeah. It was a funny deal how it worked out. So I have access to a lot of ground around home in Ohio. And it's all within like the county. Let's just say the county. And I was just driving summertime and I was targeting double crop beans. So fields that were planted in wheat, they took it off and planted beans over top of it because they were gonna stay green longer. So I was trying to make.
So why did they stay green longer? I didn't know that.
They're planted later. So they mature.
They're planted later. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So the field would be harvested out of wheat in like June.
Gotcha.
And then after that, the farmer would throw soybeans, they call them double crop beans, in that field afterwards. So you're going to get 3 weeks or up to 3 weeks longer of green beans. And then that's all you need for an early season here in Ohio. So I was targeting fields that I knew that he was putting into double crop beans. And I was just driving the roads and I drove down this one field and I never even gave this spot a second look. And I just happened to look out there and it was 500 yards, 600 yards away from the road to where this deer was. And I was like, oh my God. That deer, the body, I was like, that is a cow. And I pulled into the well road and I glassed him up and I was like, wow, that's a big deer. And in our area, like, that could mean 150. That could mean 170. You don't get a lot of the 170 aboves. And I'm thinking, that's a 160s class deer. Like, he's a giant, you know? And I called the landowner and I was like, did you know that this deer was over here? And he's like, huh? No, never knew it, you know? And so the next day I went over there and put a camera out on that bean field. And that night, got a picture of him working that edge. And he was as consistent as they could be, man. Like, if there was a cold front, so I would glass a ton. I glassed them a ton. And
how many times do you think you saw him?
I have more footage of this deer than I have ever had. Like, I thought I knew him. Like, I could go up to him and shake his hand. Like, I knew so much about him.
Right.
I seen him. I found him in August. So I didn't find him that great, like that early in the summer. I found him in August. I saw him probably 20 times.
Wow. That is consistent.
From August through the time the season opened in September, I saw him probably 20 times.
Wow.
It was like so predictable. I would watch where he would come out of the cover and he would cross the bean field and eat in this like one spot. Like, he just had a system, man. It was like one of those times, like, the deer get old, they get patternable, they start doing things, and I was like, I'm gonna kill this deer, you know? Like, and at this point I realized how much bigger he was.
Right. So when you first saw him, you were like, okay, he's a 160. You were like, he's a really good deer. He's a 160. That's a big deer. You know, that's a big deer anywhere, right? So when you finally, when did you know how big he was? Was it from trail camera pictures, or was it did you get a chance to glass him just like a little closer and get a good look at him, or?
I had trail camera pictures of him, and cell cameras, for whatever reason, like they look smaller. Deer look smaller on cell camera. I knew he was impressive, and I was like, man, and he had a bunch of junk, but I glassed him one night, and I got a really good look at him because he came out from where I was glassing like 100 yards away, and I had my spotter out, and I have footage of him, and I was like, man, that's like, he's way bigger than 160. How much bigger? I don't know. I still don't know.
Right.
But he was big, and I mean,
and when I say big, I'm like, he's 180 plus. Like, when I say big, that's kind of like my mark is like, a big deer is like 160. You know what I mean? Or better, like mid 150s, 160. Like, that's a big deer. You get to like the 170 and up mark, you're like, that's a giant, right? You get to like the 180 and you're like, dude, that's a mega. You know what I mean? It's like anything that above that is like, yeah, that's a mega giant.
Yeah, he was a mega giant.
Yeah.
And a predictable mega giant, man. But I come to learn that a lot of people knew about him. the day that I pulled in there to put my camera out, I had someone come hauling up on me, like, what are you doing back here? Who do you know that can give you permission here? And as their truck was pulling down the well road, like, I called the landowner. I was, someone's coming back here to give me trouble. I just wanted to have you on the line, you know?
Right.
So they knew about him.
Did that person also have access or no?
Yeah.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah. So there were, I don't know, 4 or 5 different people that had access to this joint. And I didn't realize that. I knew he did. I didn't realize all the other people did. And I was like playing a mental battle with myself. Like, they've been here for 4 or 5 years. I'm going to come up in here and I don't want to mess them up. And if I do kill this deer, they're going to be like, what the heck, you know? So
Right.
I almost didn't hunt them. I told Chad and Justin, I was like, I think I'm just going to lay off them, you know? Like, I don't want the drama that comes with killing a big deer like
Right.
this that other people have access to. And I was like pretty convinced that I wasn't going to do it. And then I got more and more footage of them, and I was like, I'm killing this deer. You know, I'm hunting this deer. So, and the season played out so, like, the early season played out so good. We got a cold front like the first week season opened. I had pictures of him the night before season opened. I told the other kid that hunts there, him and his mom hunt. Like, his mom hunts religiously. I thought it was super cool. I was like, I'm gonna give you guys opening weekend. I'm not gonna touch it. You guys can have it to yourself. With my job, I can hunt a lot during the week. If a cold front hits and I get the right wind, I'm going to take a chance at this deer during the week. So he knew. The opening weekend was like 80 degrees for where their setups were and where the deer was. The wind was completely terrible. And they sat in the morning and they sat in the evening. And I was like, both days. And I was like, okay, well, now this deer knows he's being hunted, so it's going to get even harder. I forget what day the season came in, but like I said, I had a picture on the day before season started. Didn't get another picture of him for 5 days. And I was like, oh, you know, there it goes.
Yeah.
I was almost surprised he stuck around so much longer after he shed his velvet. Because typically in these situations, he sheds his velvet, he's gone. But he stayed around, so I was convinced that he was going to give me an opportunity. October 3rd or something, it was like a Wednesday. We got a 20-degree temperature drop. And I had the right wind, and I went. I was like, this is my shot, you know.
Did you go, was it morning or just an evening?
Just in the evening.
Yeah.
He was on camera the night before. He was on camera the night before. So I was like, he's back. He's in the area. If I have a shot, I have tonight's hit. So I hunted. He was a no-show. Never saw the deer again. Never got another picture of the deer again. Rumor has it someone missed him in gun season. I don't know if he's still alive right now. I pulled all my cameras out of there kind of mid-October. It was just, I found out more people were there. I was like, this is just never going to happen. I needed my cameras elsewhere.
Right.
So I just went and pulled them, kind of forgot about it. And I was like, well, if he dies, someone kills him, good. You know,
right.
I hope the kid's mom shot it. Like, how cool would that be?
Right, yeah.
So she lost her husband the year before. And there's I was just like, you guys can have at it, you know.
Right.
I just didn't want to deal with it. With all the things going on with Exodus, and like, I was just like, I don't.
You needed no more,
yeah.
more stress, right?
Yeah.
And a deer of that caliber, if someone killed him, you would know about it.
100%.
You know what I mean?
He's
like,
not
that's
going under the radar.
Yeah, it's like that doesn't stay quiet, you know.
No.
So I would imagine, I mean, as long as he makes it through the winter and doesn't, I'd be curious like where he might go. Like because it doesn't sound like the pressure ran him off, because you would think like at some point he would come back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He just relocated. I talked to that kid about it before, and because he made a comment. He's like, I'm surprised he's still here. He doesn't stick around.
So he knew about him previously.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He had pictures of this deer since 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. But he's like, I've been hunting this deer for 5 years, can never kill him. And, but he doesn't stay there. He moves on, and I just couldn't figure out where he moved to. And I think it's almost like a Seek One type of deal with the deer that Lee shot this year, where there's big farms all around, and that deer hold up in a 5-area section, 5-acre area. So it could be one of those deals. I don't know. We get a ton of gun pressure in this area. It is an absolute miracle that this deer has lived this long.
Well, that's just it. It's like when you're in areas like that that have a lot of farms around that get hunted, right? It's different than hunting like, big woods where it's like not a lot of pressure. Even if there are a lot of hunters, it doesn't matter. But it's like you just can't cover all the ground, right? And so it's like who knows where they go or where they're hiding because it could be anywhere. Yep. But when you're in an area like that you have a lot of structure, and you have farms that are clearly being hunted and stuff like that. Some of those farms, I'm sure, are being driven during gun season,
Yep.
And so he's got to have like a small little behind someone's dilapidated like pole barn or something like that, or lean-to wood, like firewood shed that nobody uses anymore. There's like just a bunch of like greenbrier and garbage that he's just laying behind. You know what I mean? Like it's like envisioning like he's got to be somewhere like that. Otherwise, someone would have run across him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and someone would have killed this deer. He's got to be 7-8 years old. I mean,
right?
It's just it's a miracle. But he, I think he lives on. So I thought about going and put a camera out there and just dumping a bag of corn to see if he was still around late season. And I still might do that, and I might shed hunt over there because I think he might come back in winter in that range. I don't know.
Right.
But knowing what I know about the property and that deer, I don't know that it's even something I would target again next year. I don't think
it sounds like a challenging place to hunt.
It's a losing situation.
Yeah,
sounds like because there's a lot of people, small parcels, and everyone is hunting every parcel. So you're not going to find that piece that's not hunted, and it's just challenging.
Yeah. So so how bummed were you when that deer, like when you realized like, okay, this deer, it's not happening?
Honestly, I was in a good place with it. Like I was, like I said, I was almost to the point where I wasn't even going to hunt it.
Right.
Which is kind of crazy. Like
kind of crazy.
You're stupid. But I just don't want people not to like me. And I just like
it'd be hard not to like you, dude. You're like one of the most likable people I know.
Oh, thank you. Some of the other neighbors in the area don't seem to think so. So I just didn't want. I don't know. I just didn't want to go down that road. So I was like, whatever. And being in whitetails and being engraved in whitetail content, you just hear so much of the bad that comes with killing a big deer. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want that. I really don't want that. And I had a number 2 that was like also big. So it was easier for me to be like, well, this deer is much more visible now. I had a year of history with him, and I was like, I can make a play at this one. And if something doesn't happen with that one, it's whatever. I'm still going to be hunting a deer that is still the biggest deer I would have ever hunted.
Right. And so, all right, so that's a good transition. So, and are you referring to your target deer, like the target deer? Okay. Because, so I knew about the first one that Chad shared with me. Like as the season went, it's like I had no clue that you were on a different deer. Mm-hmm. And I actually didn't know until you sent me the pictures, just like a couple weeks ago when we were talking. Yeah. So let's turn our attention to that deer. So when did you know of that deer? Is this a deer you had some history with, like you knew for a little while? Yeah.
So last year I got access to a piece of property that I got turkey hunting permission only on. But the guy that lives there, he doesn't really hunt. He likes to get the pictures, Mm-hmm. So having the in with Exodus and having the in with that other landowner, they were good friends. I was like, I'll put as many cameras as you want on your property. Just let me turkey hunt. And he's like, all right, just share the pictures with me and it's all yours. So I had turkey hunting permission. I'm thinking this guy hunts a lot, and that's why he doesn't want me to deer hunt. We get into gun season of 2023, and I'm like, there was an 8-point, it's like a 150-inch 8-point on this farm that I was like dying to hunt. And he was showing up so consistently. And I asked the landowner, the landowner called me and told me he was getting a knee replacement. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I hate to take advantage of a situation that you're not doing good in, but if you're not going to be hunting, do you care if I go after that 8-point? He's like, oh, no, if I'm not going to hunt him, someone needs to be hunting that deer. So I didn't get access to physically deer hunt this farm until gun season 2023, so a year ago.
Right.
But I was gaining knowledge of the deer on this property. I don't want to give too many.
Yeah.
But I have access to basically a mile stretch there.
Mm-hmm.
Like almost every farm in that section, I have a mile stretch that I can hunt, and I have cameras all through it. There's one section in the middle of it that I can't access,
Mm-hmm.
but I can access. There's like 4 farms, and I have 3 of the 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get this deer on camera early season in the far south, November, far north on the mile range.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I have some history built. I ended up killing that 150 inch 8-point last year. I gun hunted him hard. Never killed him in gun season. My first bow hunt for him, I killed him.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very consistent deer, like 150 inch 8-pointer. He was beautiful.
Nice.
And this other deer was his running mate throughout the summer. So they would do similar things. But when it came to late October, November, they split off, and the other deer that was with him he would travel that mile range so often. I don't know how far south he would travel more. I don't know how much further north he would travel, but
he was spending a considerable amount of time in that in between that you were on.
Yeah. Yep. And I pieced it together because I would get him in this one clear cut in November, and going into this year, it was like November, I'm going to be in that clear cut and I'm going to kill that deer. Well, it's a new area to me, so I didn't realize how much pressure was around it. And I quickly learned that the pressure in that clear cut was more than I wanted to deal with.
Right. Not surprising though, right? Like, it's clear.
Yeah. I knew it was going to be a possibility. I was surprised at how often he was there last year, now knowing how much pressure was there.
Right.
And he was very visible. And I thought like November 2nd to 6th, like I got to be hunting the edge of that clear cut, so I'll kill him. But there was just pressure. Other people knew this deer. They were asking the landowner, hey, I hunt the edge of that clear cut. I saw this deer in the edge of the clear cut. Do you mind if I hunt it? Landowner said, someone else is hunting that same deer in that clear cut. You can't go after it, But I laid off. I never put a hunt on him in November because the people that were putting the pressure on were driving 4-wheelers all through it. And I was like, they're not going to kill him. They're just not going to.
So what were you doing? What were you doing in November then?
I went to North Dakota.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I went to North Dakota. And the morning that I left for North Dakota was like October 27th or something. I had a daylight picture of this deer on a scrape, and I was like, golly. On the property.
Always.
Yeah. On the property to the far south where I killed that 8-point last year. But that deer was playing a game with me like no other. Like mid-October, I was scouting that property looking for some scrapes popping up. I'd hang a camera. The next morning, he's on that scrape. And I'm like, okay, I got him. In my mind, I'm thinking, he's tracking me. The next day, he's a mile north. Like, he's on that camera in the morning or in the evening. The next morning, I'm getting a picture of him a mile north. Simultaneous days in mid-October. And I'm like, why is this deer traveling so much? But it happened very often where I would get a picture of him all the way to the south. The next day, I'd get a picture of him all the way to the north. So, but it was very unpredictable.
What were the timestamps like from
daylight? These are daylight sightings.
Almost 24 hours apart, or are they closer? 12. Okay.
Like
so
evening.
He would show up in an evening, then show up in the morning the next day.
Yeah, a mile apart. So like that night time frame, he was cruising. One morning, October 23rd or something, I got a daylight picture of him on that rope scrape on the north side. 2.5 hours later in the day, got a picture of him in the south, 1 mile away. And I was like, I almost had to treat this hunt for this deer like a big woods, catch him on his rotation scenario. Because I could chase him around and he could be a mile away every time. Because there was never like, if he showed up here, he was going there.
Right.
It was very chaotic. And I think it had to do with he was avoiding a lot of pressure. So he was getting bumped.
It sounds like he was getting, I was just going to say, it sounds like he's getting bumped a lot where he's having to get up in the middle of it. Because what was the date? What were the dates on this?
Like October 18th, October 19th.
Yeah, I mean, those are days, and I know you know this, but those are days that like a lot of times I'll see some of the better deer that I have on camera, like the first time where they really start to slip up, make some mistakes, almost like, I don't know if there's any truth to this, but it's like almost like they're going and kind of priming their areas, if you will, just like making a pass through saying, hey, what's up? What's happening around here? But
it was very
clear. To be that often though, during daylight though, is a little, does sound like he's getting bumped around a little bit.
It seemed like someone would go hunt in the morning and he would skirt him, or someone would go
give him the old okey doke
for the evening. Yeah, and he would skirt him. But it was just very unpredictable because I thought the first time it happened, I was like, well, I'm just going to go hunt there. The next day he showed up in daylight, and then I get a picture of him a mile away. I'm like, what the heck? And I started playing that game. Then I had to go to North Dakota. I went to North Dakota for 10 days or so in November, and that was no good. But I came back from North Dakota November 5th or something, and from the November 5th to November 14th, I didn't get a picture of that deer. And I knew other people were hunting them. I actually had a landowner call me and say, hey, I heard someone shot a drop tine buck behind so-and-so's place. And I was like, God, he's dead, So I laid off, I didn't hunt him anymore. And I put on the boots and said, I got to go find another deer to hunt. I got to go find him. And November 14th, I get a picture of him on the North Range, and he comes and his main beam, or no, he had his main beam the same time. So this deer is a drop tine on the left side. And he had a main beam, a drop tine, and no tines. All the tines were shaved right off that main beam. And I was like, oh my gosh. November 14th to November 21st, another week goes by, no pictures of him. November 21st, he comes back, and the main beam is now cut in half. So he has
dude's out there just partying, getting into it.
Yeah. So he has a little bit of a main beam and a drop tine on that side. That was his weak side, and his right side was just a wall of tines. Gun season comes in Ohio that next week, and I'm like, he's gonna get whacked, And I hunted him. I hunted him pretty hard throughout gun season, and I told myself, I said, I'm getting too far ahead, but I told myself, if this deer makes it through gun season, I'm not going to kill him. If this deer makes it through Ohio's gun season, I'm going to let him go because I know what he's going to do next year, and I'm going to have a good chance at him early. I also knew that I was going to have a chance at this deer late season, because last year in late season was the only time I ever saw this deer in person. After I shot the 8-point, I was just targeting this buck. So I started glassing, and I wanted to take pictures of him. He was probably like a 140s, 150s, or probably mid-40s deer last year. And I was just trying to get some pictures of him and glass him and take the Steve Pinkston approach. But I was doing this in late season. So I knew I had to play at this deer once the cold weather hit, and he would go back, and he would stay in that south range a lot more consistently in late season. So the Friday of gun season is December 5th. December 4th, there was a deer drive, that went from, follow me here, Clint, the north side of my range, pushed the entire thing south to the south barrier, or to the edge of the north barrier of the south range of this deer that I'm the only one allowed to hunt. So the entire thing gets pushed in the direction from north to south. My instinct tells me that this deer is now pushed to the south.
Yeah, he's either dead or he's left the county at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Or he got to that south portion. No one else can hunt that. I'm the only one that can hunt that.
Right.
There's a clear cut to the east of it that I think in early season and late season he's bedding in that and feeding on me. So the next morning, we get 4 inches of snow, and I went and sat on the edge of that clear cut, trying to catch him going back to bed, thinking that he was eating. And also, Exodus had closed. My last full day of work was December 4th.
Right.
So the day that drive went. So my cameras aren't working. So I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what's going on at this point. I don't know. I'm just going off of gut instinct here, thinking he got pushed out of this, is back on that piece to the south, probably ate there, and is going to come back to bed December 5th in the morning. That's exactly what he did. It's the only deer I saw that morning, and I killed him the last day of Ohio's gun season that I said if he makes it through gun season, I'm not going to shoot him.
That's awesome, man. How was the so what was this, what was your setup like? I mean, were you in a saddle for this? Like you were in a tree or you were on the ground? Ah, I love that shit, dude. Yeah. So talk to me about your setup.
Yeah,
and how did he come in?
I was set up. There's a little bit of a roll on this property, and I can see a lot, and that's looking towards the destination food. The bedding's behind me. I had a wind blowing from the food, like over my left shoulder, so cutting a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. His bedding is directly behind me. I put my back to that, and I was just on like a really big oak tree, and then I just kind of made a little area in front of me. But I was gun hunting, so I wasn't super concerned with what my setup was in terms of cover.
Right.
And I was sitting there, and I had he was J-hooking into the bed. He was coming around to get the wind to get into his bed, and I had just caught him out of the corner of my eye, and I just saw a deer moving quickly kind of to my right, and as legend has it, the deer was 30 yards away. Like I could have shot him with my bow.
Right.
And I was like, I'm right-handed, so I'm pointed this way, and he's coming the opposite way. So I had to do like an army crawl.
Nice.
And I just get my gun up on my knee, and I'm looking through my scope, and my scope has snow all through it, and I can see like a tiny little hole that's just on the crosshairs. And I didn't know this was him yet.
Right.
I just looked over, and I was like, oh man, big deer. And I put the crosshairs on him, and I shoot, and he turns and starts running directly at me, and I just see his frame in that drop time. I was like, oh my god, that's him. And I racked another round and put another one in his shoulder and dropped him, and he died 15 yards in front of me.
Nice, dude. How stoked were you, man?
Oh man, it was the best. It was like, dude, my last day of Exodus was the day before. The last day of work was the day before, and then I hadn't seen this deer all year, and I go and make this play on him in an area that I don't think he's been in weeks, and he just shows up.
Just on gut instinct, and he shows up. Yeah.
Yeah, and he shows up going back to bed that morning. It was like the best.
Man, that's the best feeling too. And it's just like all the stuff you like, you know, deer related, that other big deer, personal, with like the work related stuff, like the, you know, the year that you kind of had up until then, man. It's like, it's got to be a little bit, you know, I don't want to say redemption, but it's like, finally I got a break.
Yeah, it felt so good to like have that come together on that deer that I was targeting basically all year. I gave up on him, thought he was dead. Someone told me he got shot. Then he breaks the left side of his antlers off, and then I'm like, do I even hunt him, you know?
Right.
And when he came through the woods, like when I saw him and I was like, big deer, I was like, that's a big deer.
Right.
You know, that's he's
How old
big.
do you think he was?
4.5, around there. The pictures of him the previous year, you're like, is he 4.5 or is he a really good 3.5? So he's either 4.5 or 5.5.
Right. Nice. The so from this season, you know, the deer that you were chasing previously, like, you know, the early season one, and then, you know, killing this one in the late season. What was there anything that you kind of learned this year that's like a lesson or something that one of these deer taught you that, you know, you'll take into future seasons? Because I always like, I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm like getting older now or what, but or as I get older, I guess I should say, like I usually always like there's something that every deer that either I mess up on or I can always look back on a season, and there's always things like within hunts, like small things that, you know, you might make this mistake in hindsight, and it's not necessarily a mistake. It's just like you're doing stuff, and like nothing's for certain. Like you don't know anything 100%. Like they're wild animals, right? They can do a lot of things. There's a lot of variables, right? But so I don't try to dissect, I guess, every hunt so much that way, right? Because there is really no, I made the best decision I could make in that moment with the information I had. So that's as right as any other decision I would have made, you know?
Yep.
And so I try not to do that too much, like beat myself up over that stuff. But like usually after the season's over, I can kind of look back and say, man, I really wish I felt like I was not as sharp at this part. Or,
Yeah.
man, I felt like in hindsight, I was really just not on my game related to this, or I didn't pay attention to this enough, or whatever the case was. Like the bigger picture kind of like thing to solve, or a hole in my game I need to plug, or whatever. You know what I mean? So I'm just curious, was there anything like that for you?
Yeah. This deer taught me how um how much I try to shoebox other deer into an area, and how much of their range I actually don't have access to, and how much they're doing in a small parcel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you have access to a small parcel and you have this deer showing up randomly, they're not just on the next property over
They
a
were
lot
the
of
next
times.
six, probably. You know.
Yeah, like it was just astounding to me that the same, like I would get him at gray light and then in the morning a mile apart in this area, and I'm like, this is just nuts. And I remember sending Chad a picture of him. The first night I got a daylight picture of him, I went and hunted that spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
The next morning is a mile away, and I'm like, I said it to Chad, and I was like, I was a mile off. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was a mile off. I got a daylight picture of the deer,
Mm-hmm.
right? At the night, like everyone's like, wait for him to daylight, wait for him to daylight, and you go in and capitalize on that. Well, he was a mile off in daylight the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So it just taught me how unpredictable and how much further I need to widen my range, even if I don't have access to hunt them. And that's something Don does really, really good.
Hmm.
He has cameras in mile radiuses in every place that he's allowed, and he just gets permission to hang cameras. And that kind of shows you how big their range actually can be. Not every deer is going to be like that, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But like that big deer that he called Mel, he shot him early because how much of a roamer he was. And I think of this deer in that way. Like he was just a roamer, man.
Mm-hmm.
But at that same time, the annual data was 100%.
Right. Yeah. Where he was going to be
I
in the late
just,
season. Yeah.
well, in November,
Or in November. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
all of it,
Yeah.
early season, November, late season,
Yeah.
I didn't have enough cameras in 23 to tell me about how much he does in 20. I learned it in 24 because I targeted him.
Right.
I had cameras placed strategically for him, and then when I got the first picture on the south property and got the first picture on the north property and realized how big his range was, I just went in the middle of that and started trying to find his path. How is he getting there to here?
Right.
And I'd pick him off. Every camera I would hang, I'd pick him off, I'd pick him off, I'd pick him off. So it told me where he was traveling, and that's why I said I had to kind of treat it like a big woods scenario, because I didn't know when he was going to come. I just knew he was going to do that.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy how much you can learn when you just target a single deer and let them just kind of show you how they use the woods. And it is surprising how off we are sometimes, you know, because we think we know a lot about them. Like Tony and I have talked about this in the past where, you know, even if you're hunting, you know, whether you're hunting big woods or whether you're hunting smaller private parcels, we often think we know a lot about a deer, you know, and it's usually just a fraction of what they're doing, you know. You know, because that deer I chased this year, you know, where he was killed, in hindsight, you know, well, I shouldn't say where he was killed, where he was found dead, because I know exactly where he was found dead. I finally got that intel to where I kind of was like, okay, cool, I could walk to where that was at now, you know. And I just thought to myself, I was like, I never once looked in that area, you know, and I'm sure he was probably shot in that general area. Someone just made a bad shot and the deer ran off and died. But it's never dawned on me to be there because all the intel I got of him was all in this one particular area. It was like a 500-acre area roughly. And like I had multiple cameras in that area and I was picking him up. But there was there was always one direction he would be traveling that I would have a trail camera picture of that I was always be like, I'd be like, I mean, I think he's over here, but it's like he would never show up on this one camera very often, you know. And then in hindsight, when I look at it, I'm like, well, no shit, he was going over there. Like that's what he was doing. Like, how did I not put that together? You know what I mean? It's just one of those things in hindsight. So where now I'm like, man, I should have investigated a little further in that particular direction. And there's between where I kind of had him at to where like he was where he was found, that particular kind of swath, like there's not really, I won't say there's nothing to hunt in there, but it would not be the first place someone would think of to go hunt, put it that way. You know what I mean? And I don't think he was living there. I think where me and my couple buddies were hunting him, I think we were pretty well on top of where he was spending most of his time. I think once like late November hit, like mid-November, I think that was whenever he was doing his excursions to that other area, or more consistent. I mean, I'm sure he was over there prior to that. But yeah, it's I just didn't account for that, you know. And it was probably the area that had the least amount of pressure, to be honest. You know.
Yeah, that's why they find those places. I'm thinking with what you're saying and what I learned from this deer, if I wanted to go find this mega somewhere, like I can't look at the next property over. He's probably not there. He's probably a mile, 2 miles, a few miles away. Like, I never think of, because all these small, when you get into a small parcel hunting, when you think the next property, you start saying 4 properties over, you're like, oh, that's forever away. It's not that far.
No. I mean, 600-700 yards. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a lot of times
not that far.
Yeah.
Because you think like, oh, he went 4 properties over. You're like, well, he only went 700 yards.
Right.
So I need to think like, man, he could be 12 properties over.
Yeah.
So that's mainly what it taught me, and then also how other tactics can play into where small parcels. Like I took your guys' approach in the big woods of Ohio to kill this deer. I probably hunted him 11 times, and I hunted him 11 times in the same tree. Because it was like just a matter of time before he moves through here. Like I'm gonna catch him coming through here. It was like Ryan Glitsky.
Right.
I'm gonna catch him moving through here, and it just happened to be with a gun instead of a bow. But it worked. He 100% finally did it. Right.
Yeah. You just need him to do it that one time. That's it. You know, you just got to be right place, right time. Man. Chase, and I don't know. I'm not all hung up on chasing a single buck. You know, it was fun this year, you know, for obvious reasons. I don't know that I would look to do it again. You know, like it's not like I'm chomping at the bit to do it again. It's like I think next year it's like I'm a hope. I mean, if there's a big one, it's like I'll be stoked, right? But in the back of my mind, I'm kind of hoping. I'm like, man, I hope I've got like 3 or 4 that are just like really good bucks that I'd be happy to like chase and shoot one of those. You know what I mean? Just it was nerve-wracking for sure, you know, but I mean, it was worth it in my opinion, you know, even though I didn't fill a tag, it was still a good hunt. Still had a lot of fun, you know, but
I get that same thought, man. I'm like, I really wish I had a bunch of deer to go after, because it would make it way less stressful if one of them got killed. Because every time someone would, like, there was another kid hunting him, and he'd send me a picture of him. He's like, I'm going in after him tonight. And I'm like, good luck. But at the back of my head, I'm like, dang it, man. You know?
Hope you drop your bow. No.
So, it's less stressful when you have options, for sure.
Yeah.
But it almost is it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
When it does happen and you did purposely target that deer.
Yeah. I mean, for me, you know, this coming year, it's like I'll be traveling again in the fall, so it'll be a little bit different. Where I'll, you know, have just probably October again this year. You know, this year I didn't go anywhere, so I stuck around. But next year I'll be rolling out sometime late October, you know, early November to hunt. But so with that, what's your loose plans for next year? You already thinking? I'm already thinking about it. It's like I'm ready to go out and gather cameras and check trail cameras. I haven't checked a bunch of them. I'm ready to go out and start scouting again. Like I'm just, you know, I'm biding my time till the weather gets a little bit better. And I got some work travel coming up that I got to kind of take care of first. But once that all kind of gets put to bed, then it's like I'm looking forward to getting back in the timber and start making my plans for next year.
Yeah. Loose plans. Probably going to do North Dakota again. just can't keep me away from that place.
That's
You
your
can take
jam, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, you can take the boy out of North Dakota, but you can't take the North Dakota out of the boy.
Right.
But I love going. I love that, and it's an earlier opening this year than it's ever been.
Okay.
So Trey and I are going to do that again. But I got a new job, so I don't fully know what my
Schedule
can
B or
do's and
whatever.
can't do's
Right.
are going to be. Like with Exodus, it's very flexible. If my work was done, they're like, yeah, dude, go. Like,
Do
you
whatever.
earned it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I am working remote now, so maybe I can prove myself enough to
do what I did, man. I worked from my
Yeah.
trailer a lot this year chasing that deer. You know, Starlink on the trailer, bro. It's like,
Yep. So I may try to pull that, but I have kind of the point system for drawing is like it just gets me all the time. But I'm in a situation where like I might draw Iowa and I can draw Kansas.
right. Yeah.
So
I'm in a situation where I could get both tags next year if I want.
Yeah.
Like, I for sure could get both. And I'm kind of holding out because the Iowa trip is not this coming year, but the year after, because as long as I'm still working remotely and stuff like that, I'm actually just going to move there for the fall and
that makes sense.
live and hunt.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go for broke, you know, because it's getting harder and harder to draw now. You know, I think most people are going to have like 5 points to draw Iowa, you know, if not maybe 6,
Depending on
you know what I mean? Yeah.
Depending on what unit.
Yeah. And so, with the unit I want to go back to, that's where, you know, it'll definitely take probably 5. And so with that, it's like, I don't know how many more times I'm going to go, you know? And so
Do it
I'm
right.
like, yeah. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go there and I'm going to live for like end of September through like Thanksgiving.
That's cool.
You know, and just live and work and hunt fronts and take vacation days when the good weather's there. I want to take a day or two off. Otherwise, hunt mornings, evenings. You know, as long as I'm working remotely still at that point, which I should be.
Sure.
But speaking of your new gig, man, like let people know, you know, where that's at and what you're working on.
Yeah. So I took a position as the marketing manager for Hawk Optics. It's a optics company that makes rifle scopes, binoculars, spotting scopes, rangefinders, the whole gamut of optics, tactical stuff. The catalog's pretty impressive. There's like 118 different rifle scopes.
Nice.
And they kind of say they're not necessarily a rifle scope company, they're a reticle company. So the reticles are all specific to calibers, and it's pretty cool. It's a cool gig. It's a big role increase for me from coming from Exodus to being the content director or creative director to being the marketing manager and handling all aspects of marketing. I'm excited about the opportunity. It's cool. It's
Nice.
Based in the headquarters is based in the UK, so the company was born in the UK, and the US headquarters is in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I'm 4 hours from the office here. If I have to travel in ever so often, I travel over, but otherwise I'm just remote.
Awesome, man. That's pretty sweet, dude. I forget what I was going to say now. Like the reticles being specific to, you said to caliber, like so caliber round. That's kind of wild, man. I don't know if I've ever.
Yeah, that's so they do the ballistics off of, and I may be speaking out of turn. I'm only like 3.5 weeks into this,
right?
But the way that it was
Tell
explained
me everything
to me,
you know. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
The way that it was explained to me is, say, I'm going to use a 350 Legend because it's a really popular scope for us because of how popular straight wall cartridges have been. So you have a range of like a 150 grain bullet to a 180 grain bullet. Well, they would do the ballistics based on a 165 grain bullet and etch in your holdover points in the reticle.
Oh,
so you would your zero would be 150, and then you'd have your next holdover point at 200, your next holdover point at 250, and that's etched into the glass. So it tells you where to zero it, and then if you have a deer that's out at 200, you already have your mark right on it. And this round may be 0 to 100, and then you have a 150 and a 200,
Right.
depending. But the way the ballistics work out and the way the engineers designed it, you can shoot any straight wall cartridge, 350 Legend, 450 Bushmaster, it doesn't matter. In a hunting scenario, it's going to be accurate enough. So it takes the guesswork out of your holdover points, and you don't have to think like, man, did I zero this at 100 or 150? Is my next one 200 or 250? It tells you right in the glass.
Right.
And it's illuminated reticle too, so it's super easy to see.
That's cool, man. It sounds way smarter than I am, is essentially where I think I'm at. Dude, that's why I do that. That's why I'm shooting a longbow now. It just makes it like I can't shoot beyond 15 yards. I don't have to have a range. It's like I'm just going to pull it back and let it rip, But, awesome, man. Well, brother, I'm glad you landed on your feet. They got a good guy in you. You're going to do awesome stuff there. I'm stoked for you. I'm stoked that you killed your target deer. I'm glad we finally got a chance to chat. And we'll make sure it's not so long between this chat and the next chat. But before you run, let people know where they can follow along with you and get a hold of you if they need to.
Yeah, it's just Cam the Cameraman on Instagram. The Hawk Optics on social, Hawk Life on Instagram. Yeah, that's about it.
Awesome, bro. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you do that for me. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, and Lathrop & Sons Boot Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.